Warning, do not watch this alone. What you're about to hear is not a police case. It's not a courtroom story. It's a ritual that went wrong, or possibly right. This story involves children, fire, and something that answered when it shouldn't have. Some witnesses still refuse to speak about what they saw that night. Others say the flames remember. In June of 2012, near the quiet, humid waterfront of St. Petersburg, Florida, a small group gathered as the sun finally bled out into the Gulf of Mexico. There were no chanting crowds, no robed cultists like you see in the movies. It was just a woman and a group of children who trusted her completely. She was a school teacher, respected in her community. Neighbors described her as quiet, maybe a little shy, but utterly normal. She was the kind of person you'd ask to watch your kids, the kind of person you'd never second guess, until she started talking about demons. At first, friends said she was just spiritual, exploring new ideas, finding her path. Then, the language changed. She became obsessed. Her conversations were no longer about light and energy. They were about darkness and entities. Then, that obsession curdled into fear. She started telling people, with a chilling certainty, that something evil was latching onto the children in her life. She claimed it was a spiritual sickness, a parasite that had found a home inside them, and she was convinced it had to be burned out. She wasn't talking about a metaphorical fire either. She meant real flames. The only way to cleanse them, she insisted, was to fight fire with fire. And as the sun set on that fateful day, she was ready to begin the exorcism. According to statements gathered afterward, the small group met near a secluded pier just before the last light vanished. A small fire was lit in a makeshift pit. It wasn't anything dramatic or cinematic. Just a few pieces of wood, some kindling. It was the kind of small, sad fire you might see on any beach. But witnesses, people who were there, later claimed the flames didn't behave normally from the very start. They leaned sideways, as if listening intently to the hushed words being spoken. They would flare up suddenly when certain names were mentioned, then die down just as quickly. The air grew still and heavy. The teacher told the children that what they were about to feel wasn't pain, it was purification. Fire, she explained, was a holy seal. It would protect their souls from the darkness that was trying to claim them. One child, a young boy, hesitated. He pulled his hand back, fear finally breaking through the woman's spell. That's when the lighter she was holding failed. It wouldn't spark. And according to multiple accounts, at that exact moment, the gentle coastal wind died instantly. The palm trees stopped swaying. The sound of the waves seemed to muffle. There was just an oppressive, unnatural silence. So she reached into her bag, pulled out a bottle of perfume, and poured the alcohol-based liquid onto the boy's hand. This time, when she brought the flame close, the fire didn't just catch. It took the offering eagerly, leaping onto his skin. Officially, this is where the coherent part of the police report stops. The details become a jumble of panicked 911 calls and confused, traumatized statements. But unofficially, in the whispers and hushed stories shared among locals in the weeks and months that followed, something else happened. A fisherman, out on his boat later than usual, claimed he saw a second shadow near the fire. It was taller than any human, impossibly long and thin, and it moved against the light, not with it. He said it didn't cast a shadow, it was one. Another witness, a teenager who had been walking nearby, said the smoke from the fire didn't just rise into the night sky, it twisted into shapes. He swore he saw faces in the smoke, their mouths wide open, as if in a silent scream. And perhaps most chilling of all, one of the children later whispered to a child protective services counselor. After the fire started, it wasn't her voice anymore. The counselor asked what that meant. The child just shook his head and said, it came from her mouth. But it was someone else talking. The police reports mention the physical evidence, first-degree burns, minor cuts, and the overwhelming silence of the children, who seemed to be in a state of shock. But the reports don't mention what the first responders encountered. Firefighters who arrived to extinguish the last of the embers later told colleagues that the ground in that spot remained unnaturally warm for hours, long after any normal fire would have cooled. It was a deep, penetrating heat, as if the earth itself had been cooked from below. One veteran police officer, a man who had seen everything, refused to step closer than 10 feet to the fire pit. He just stood there, staring, and told his partner, "Something's wrong here." As they were packing up, a nearby streetlight flickered erratically for almost a minute, then shattered, plunging the area into darkness. And for days afterward, neighbors up and down the waterfront complained of a strange smell that wasn't smoke. They all described it the same way, like burnt metal and rot. In the end, the woman was arrested. The children were taken into protective custody. The official explanation was a swift and severe psychotic break. Mental illness. Case closed. It was a neat, tidy box for a story that refused to fit. But someone in the city government, someone in law enforcement, must have felt something more. Because within a week, the fire pit was quietly and quickly filled in with concrete. No memorial was ever placed. No marker. There is no official record of it ever having been there. But locals say if you go to that spot on the waterfront at night, especially when the air is still and quiet, you can still feel it. A pocket of warmth rising from the concrete. Because something heard the woman's desperate prayer that night, and it hasn't left. That was only the beginning. After the arrest, the story should have been over. A tragic, baffling crime solved. But that's when the really strange things began. In the weeks that followed, neighbors living near the pier started calling the police, reporting the sounds of children laughing and splashing near the water, always after midnight. When they'd look, there was nothing but fog. Security cameras installed in the area started glitching in bizarre ways. They wouldn't just malfunction. They would freeze on specific empty frames. A shot of the deserted pier, a close-up of the dark water, an image of the burned-out posts. The footage would lock on these still images for hours before resuming normal function. Perhaps the most chilling detail came from inside the police department itself. One of the first officers on the scene, a seasoned veteran with over 20 years on the force, resigned just 3 weeks after the incident. He didn't file for early retirement or transfer. He just walked away. His co-workers said he was pale and withdrawn, barely speaking to anyone. The only thing he was ever heard saying about that night was to his partner, in a hushed, terrified whisper, that wasn't a crime scene, it was an invitation. He never elaborated and was never heard from again. With the official investigation closed, an unofficial one began in the hushed conversations and quiet corners of the town. Rumors started to circulate, spreading like wildfire but never spoken too loudly. People began digging into the teacher's past, and what they found painted a disturbing picture. It was said she had been obsessively studying ancient purification rituals from obscure, forgotten texts. Her internet history was a rabbit hole of folklore and demonology. She had apparently developed a belief that malevolent entities, demons, could enter our world through bodies of water. And according to these ancient beliefs, fire was the only thing that could seal the gateway to cauterize the wound between worlds. But a more sinister rumor suggested she wasn't the architect of this horrific plan. She wasn't the leader. She was a follower. These whispers claimed she was being instructed by something that had appeared to her in her dreams. She had allegedly confided in a friend about a recurring vision of a figure made of swirling smoke and embers, standing over a dark body of water. She said it didn't speak in a normal voice. Instead, its words crackled and hissed, like the sound of wet wood burning in a fire. This entity, she believed, was the one who gave her the instructions for the ritual. And then there were the children. The ones who were there that night. In the aftermath, several of them began suffering from the exact same recurring nightmare. They would dream they were back at the pier, standing at the edge of the water. In the dream, the fire would suddenly reignite, blazing higher and hotter than before. And then a voice, the same crackling, burning voice, would whisper from all around them, "Not clean enough." One boy woke his parents up screaming, telling them about hands made of ash and soot reaching out from the water, trying to pull him in. The doctors and child psychologists all diagnosed it as shared trauma, a predictable response to a horrifying event. They prescribed therapy and medication and assured the parents that with time, the nightmares would fade. But one therapist, a well-respected professional who was treating one of the children, abruptly quit her practice. She walked out of a session, pale and shaking, and refused to ever write her official notes on what the child had told her. When pressed by her colleagues, she simply said, "Some things are better left undocumented." She moved out of the state a month later. This is where the official account ends and the story becomes truly dangerous. This is where it morphs into something that you can't disprove, a local legend that has taken on a life of its own. Some of the locals, the ones who have lived by that water their whole lives, believe the ritual didn't fail. They believe it succeeded, at least partially. They think something was pulled through from the other side, but it didn't fully cross over. It was trapped, bound to the place, bound to the pier, and most of all, bound to fire. An urban legend has now taken root among the teenagers in the area. It's a stark warning: never light a fire near the pier at night. No bonfires, no lighters, not even a single match. They say if you do, the flame will grow unnaturally fast, erupting into a roaring blaze from a tiny spark. They say you'll see shadows moving in the firelight where no one is standing. Dark figures that flicker and dance at the edge of your vision. And sometimes, the most terrifying part is when the fire suddenly goes out on its own, for no reason at all. It's as if the entity that was summoned is looking at the meager flame and is disappointed. So you see, this story was never really about one disturbed woman and a crime she committed. It was about something far older and more powerful: belief. It was about what happens when modern ignorance meddles with ancient, primal forces. Fire isn't a cleansing agent. It doesn't purify. In the wrong hands, with the wrong intention, it's a beacon. It's a signal. It invites. And some doors, once opened, don't close just because the ritual is over. They remain ajar, waiting. The official case file is stamped resolved. The police consider it closed. The town tries to forget. And the truth of what really happened that night is buried under layers of fear and denial. But down at the pier, on cold, moonless nights, people still see a faint, flickering glow over the water. Fires still burn there when no one is around to light them. Subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story gives you a new nightmare.